And bam, we are live. Welcome, guys, to episode number 12 of the Lift Free and Diet Hard podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Coates, and I brought back a friend of mine, Chad Hargrove. You can find one of his episodes in the earliest archives of the Fitness Devil stuff, and he's an online fitness and nutrition coach. And one of the cool things about Chad is early on, as Instagram sort of was really blowing up for fitness professionals, Chad really jumped on that and grew a really large following that he now has, consistently serving, and it's led to a lot of online clients and a lot of success in that realm. So first and foremost, I want to see what you've been up to since the last time we sat down. I was in Toronto in the fall, going to a couple of Tool concerts, wearing my Tool shirt. And so we went to dinner with Louis Guarino and Carol McDonald, and that was really fun. So what have you been up to since? And I'll throw a couple other things that you can dance around too. I know you talked about like career branding and maybe being brand a little bit. Where's your focus been on that? And let's see. I know you mentioned the idea of losing weight slow and the battle with the fast weight loss marketing stuff. So
So I guess since that day, what was it, Tironi in Toronto? Yeah, we had some drinks there and stuff. But it's been, what I did. I think within about a month after that, I went home to. I left my lease in Toronto. I was planning on traveling through the winter. And business-wise, it's been kind of similar up to that point. But I was going to go travel over the winter, and obviously all of this stuff happened. So I was stuck with my parents' place 3 months over the course of the holidays. I left my year, and I ended up kind of getting spit back to the city in about March. Obviously with no travel and all that stuff goes. So we'll see if I end up doing that. But business wise, it's been pretty level. I haven't made too many changes there as far as my one-on-one coaching goes. That's been fairly stable through this period. But as far as the business side and the branding side in that conversation, I guess there's been, I've been kind of just trying to think of like where this business goes, because for the most part over the last 3 years I've just been kind of like hitting social media as hard as I can, and as far as the brand of my business goes, it's basically just been kind of just whatever the crap I think is important on a daily basis, and just coming up with that, where there's been no actual structure with how am I differentiating myself from people. And I think we go back to probably episode 3, 4, 5 of Fitness Devil podcast, when I had just started getting a following, an audience of a greater magnitude compared to just selling to my friends and that type of stuff. And I kind of just went with that for about 3 years, which has worked out really well. And I kind of it was kind of like, what are the next steps? And when you start to get to a point where I don't know, business is good and it's doing well, you kind of think what's the next step? And obviously when you get into a place where people are seeing my stuff, but they're also seeing like some of the friends I have, some of your stuff, all this stuff, it's like, how are people going to decide how to work with you? And I was working with a business coach about up until several months ago, but we on day one we went over a unique selling proposition, which is everyone's probably heard of that in business, but it's basically just like what's going to make you different from everyone else, even though we're really all selling the same things, or should be selling the same things, but how are you going to differentiate yourself? And this could be you like donuts versus other trainers who may not like donuts as much, but it could be the animals you have, or Harry Potter. We both know Jordan Side, he hits Harry Potter pretty hard. But it could also be just like your beliefs as far as what your brand stands for, or you don't believe people should be doing a lot of cardio, or I get people these results on 2 workouts a week, or branding yourself around certain trends like intermittent fasting or ketogenic diet, or whatever you want to do. But on day one with my business coach, he kind of was like, like, here's an example, because I was looking for some examples. He goes, you could be the guy that helps people lose weight slow. And I kind of, brushed over it, and I was like, okay, that's a cute example. Like, on to the next one. I kind of just like, it was kind of like an afterthought. And then over the course of, I think 7 months later or something, I was brushing over some business stuff, just like a copywriting book or something like that. And someone mentioned some sort of concept in marketing or copywriting. And someone built a business around like get rich slowly, and it kind of just like knocked me over the head. And I was like, oh, I could see how that would work, and I could see how that could, like, people could kind of latch onto that idea. And it got to a point where I think it happened again. Someone mentioned it, and I just thought to myself, like, most of the stuff that I believe in is around patience and around teaching people how to do it a little bit slowly. And my most successful clients didn't rush the process. They're normal people. They go out and drink. They go on vacations. So it was just like time for a certain amount of honesty with that. And now I'm kind of in a period of kind of testing it out and seeing how people respond to it. I have a 30-day challenge where I'm kind of teaching people how to just start a diet properly, like start a fat loss process properly without, like, the 1,200 calorie a day stuff, and seeing how people respond to it. And if it goes well, the words are positive about it coming from the customer, I may push it out a little bit harder. But yeah, it's just a matter of just finding something that is different than what everyone else is saying.
Something that you said in there about the next step. This is something that, having been in the industry a decade, you watch all these people as you're learning and coming up through. And one of the things that I never really clued in early on, I'm starting to see much more in recent years, is these people who've attained this certain level. It was a sort of naive notion that, oh, you reach this level and you're at that level. But you're seeing a lot of successful people now who are pivoting in new directions, and they're not necessarily, I mean, a lot of people have already, a lot of the names that we know are no longer coaching one-on-one on the gym floor. A lot are, a guy like Lee Boyce, who's just on, and Lee still works with clients in person. Lee's also young for a guy who's been around a long time. He's still quite young. But then there are other people who you can tell there is the goal of not necessarily leaving the fitness industry, but they got bigger, broader goals. And I suppose there's also people too who pivoted. We're just kind of used to their pivot, like a Dr. Mike Isertel, who is one of the co-founders of Renaissance Periodization, and they're a big company. They do really, really well. And Mike started out as a professor amongst other things, right? So there have been a lot of people who made those shifts before. So we can expect people to, as they gain more traction, more brand, to want to make shifts. And while personally I do like coaching clients on the gym floor, I think a lot of people's long-term plan is to get away from that floor. And I think the industry, and you might be able to speak to this, has sort of been selling, hey, like, get off the gym floor and go into online training. And then there's online training, but it's still work, right? I mean, I know I have friends who have over 100 online clients, if it's like training clients or nutrition clients, or some of the stronger you coaches, like Dean, my former co-host, he's probably, I suspect very well he's over 100 clients just in nutrition coaching.
Yeah.
And that sort of seems mind-boggling to me. But then again, I probably juggle 40 to 50 in-person people. Not everybody is there weekly. Some are a little more sporadic.
Yeah.
So, but there's the desire to probably grow beyond that. I mean, Jordan said we had talked to him a long time ago, and if anybody remembers, he had explored the idea of a coffee company. Now that never materialized or kind of worked out. Or you get obviously Lane Norton has got a whole bunch of big things going on, and he had his carbon brand on bodybuilding.com, and he had Avatar, and again, both of those things also flamed out too. So those are some examples of some pivots in that direction that actually didn't work. Now they're both highly successful individuals who've still gone on to do other things.
Yep.
The lesson there is, I'm not one of these big people that like, let's celebrate the hell out of failure, but look at these notable failures, and clearly the people learn from them, and it didn't slow them down. So do you see yourself ever wanting to build something or go in a direction that gets away from actually coaching the end user client?
Yeah, well, and I think that's kind of where I'm at, like a bit of a crossroads with what I'm doing is, I love the coaching, but there's also an aspect of interest in, in reaching more people, or in just developing a business. I mean, like I there's an entrepreneurial itch. And I know the entrepreneurial thing in, our industry is like, it's just a total buffet of stupidity sometimes. But, there is an aspect of just wanting to do good and wanting to, reach more people, and, put good out, put stuff that's actually going to help people, but also just an interest in, like, building a business. And I'm still like at a point where I'm just like, do I want to have a team? Do I want to build, like, do I want to hire coaches? Do I want to is that the model I want to go under? I look at I look up to Mike Dola a lot of Stronger You, and I just can't imagine the stuff he deals with on a daily basis, just managing such a big thing. Like I can just only imagine. So do I want to go something in that route, or is there or do you want to be like selling courses and searching for quote unquote passive income, which obviously requires a tremendous amount of work before it ever happens. But so I'm not even sure what I wanted. I've kind of exhausted my limit as far as putting out content on a daily basis and coaching clients at the same time. And I know where I don't like. I know I want to stay in business somehow. But it's just a matter of what it actually looks like, and whether it's all of the above or whether it's some of it. But I just think that the ability to say it in a different way, and say it in a way that I think could actually help people get better results. But whether that's me saying like, what's the best thing to offer is kind of what I want to offer, or whether it's video courses that people are actually learning, like, that it's improving people's relationship with food and, giving people more realistic diet advice, or whether it's hiring coaches, because I think that's actually the best use of people's money. And I think, like, based on being a coach myself, I've seen, like, I put out a challenge for $67 recently, and I sell coaching for quite a bit more than that. And it's like I had to hammer people over the head to buy something for $67, and people are just like, coaching, it felt like it was almost easier for me to put out one pitch for coaching openings where I can get a whole bunch of people coming in for much more. So it's about what people think is what's going to help them the most, and that's kind of where I'm at in terms of trying to decide where I'm going. And I think I talked to you a little bit about being stale on social media and stuff, and I think that kind of plays into it. Is just like, it's felt the same for a long time. So I'm kind of like, what's going to be different about this? But I think I don't know. It's just whatever is going to be most valuable for people out there.
And let's come back to stale in a second, but you hit on something really important, is that bumping up against your limits in terms of the number of people you can work with, and what you can physically coach in your current format. I think there's probably a lot of people listening who probably haven't, they're still working on it, they're still building up, and they may not know what bumping up against that ceiling feels like, right? You get told various things like, oh, you've got to do, years back, it was all semi-private training. And I never bought into the idea, because I actually don't like it very much, because I feel like the way that I do my dynamic with my clients, I don't feel like that necessarily gives them the relationship that a lot of my clients value. And I obviously think now, given all the shit that's going on with COVID or whatever, and I'm still in one of the jurisdictions that has been the least affected by and has had the least stringent lockdown. So I'm still able to coach full time, and I've had no issues there since we've reopened. But I just don't see semi-private as being probably something people are going to jump on right now. Online, obviously, is the more recent, more popular pivot, and makes more sense. Yes, it just has to become what each individual person foresees wanting to do. And mention hiring coaches. So Sohee Lee is a good example. She's got a team. I think she's got 4 coaches. Myra being one of them, who I chat with on a semi-regular basis. She's really cool. And then you got Mike Dola, obviously, who built a much bigger organization, Stronger You. And you got Jay Wythe and now Brad Dieter, friends of mine who run Macros Inc. Brad recently reached out to me and asked me to find him some coaches, because I have a big network of people. And sure enough, he shared a bunch of my referrals. So, and that's really cool. And for a lot of coaches as well, getting to work, like, not everybody has that entrepreneurial spirit or the stamina, the intestinal fortitude to constantly work at it, and to even want to grow your own big brand. A lot of people would feel a lot safer working under an umbrella that kind of feeds you, and you can do the coaching work best. Guido and I were talking about this on the phone yesterday, and how I've been putting a ton of effort into my social media, and I like and embrace the idea of establishing a brand identity, whereas Guido is much more inclined to, he's got a baby on the way. He's not interested in serving that. So he's really more interested in being part of something bigger, doing his job really well. Obviously, he's being well compensated for it, but he doesn't have that same itch to, hey, I need to be Jordan Syatt. Hey, I need to be Jill Coleman, or these people who've done a really good job of putting themselves out and establishing a brand name in the industry. Or guys like Martin Rooney, right? Who's built a great organization underneath them, but he's still a big brand name.
Yeah.
So with the staleness, what's been your thought process with how you felt about feeling stale, and is there any insight into how to pivot or to get through the staleness?
Yeah, like I well, first off, why did it come? And I think like part of it was just that like I just felt like I was getting up and doing the same things a lot. And I think part of it was COVID. Like it's just like not being able to be into the gym. I'm living in a house that's like just super narrow. So setting up video and doing different things here has been challenging. And I think like it got to a point where like some of it I think was a little bit of imposter syndrome, like and which I like hadn't dealt with in a way that I felt up until like the last 6 months. And I don't know why. It was because I just um I hit a point with like all of this stuff was just nothing that I imagined would happen. Like if you talked to me 3 years ago, the idea that like I would have more than 10 or 15 clients at a time, or like that I'd like that getting clients wouldn't be the hard part about this. I just always imagined that it would be a struggle. Um, and I think now that I'm at this point where like, I do have an itch entrepreneurially. Yeah. And building things, and I can understand how I watch people who go to great heights with these and build big businesses and stuff like that. I can understand it. And I think now I'm kind of just watching those people who are kind of like a step away, and I'm like almost intimidated by it, or almost like my worries are maybe a little bit more complicated, so that the problems to solve sound like bigger and more complicated. So it's almost like I'm hitting this wall where the the feeling of trying to break through it is harder than it's ever been. And it's also like the advice in order in how to get through it, or like how to get, how to grow beyond this, or what way to do it. The advice out there is much less, and what is out there is much more expensive. So it's almost like there's a bit of a loneliness to it. There is a bit of a do I deserve to go do that? Or, am I comfortable here? Or, if I get too comfortable, is this going to go away? And I think that part of it, and actually one thing I wanted to talk about, because I knew we'd talk about this, and I don't think people talk about it much, but, the validation piece of social media is, something I've experienced more than, most people have. Like my phone has essentially been in a drug house for about three years. And what I mean by that is every time I flick it, stuff is happening in a way that like my friends want to grab my phone and see what it's like because it's just lighting up constantly. And especially between 2018, 2019, that was happening in a way that was like, and I don't care how aware you are that the phones are addicting, and these things are just like dopamine hits and that type of stuff. I don't care how aware you are. It's kind of like marketing. It's like if you're really good at marketing and advertising, you can basically tell people you're manipulating them and then still manipulate them. Just because you're aware that the phone is addicting you doesn't. It's good to be aware of that, but it's not saving you. So when you're on social every day and hitting those, the likes, the comments, the DMs, like just like I love you, like it's just happening all the time. And then what happens is the platform starts to take that attention away a little bit, and obviously they're making room for ad space, and that's their model, and that's that's going to happen. But over the past 6 to 12 months, increasingly, like I'll put out a post and get 8 comments, or all the likes are down, or the posts aren't going as far. So like when I flick my phone, there's a lot less of that happening, and it's almost felt like a bit of a come down in that it's just like it doesn't feel as good. And of course I'm not like, oh, poor me, like I need my Instagram likes, but it's like just the habit of flicking the phone or getting onto it or just doing my job. It's not happening as much. So the motivation to go to it has been just less. And I think that has actually a play in just like, it's just not exciting to be there when your views are down, and it's almost kind of scary. It's like, oh Jesus, is this going to keep happening? And worrying about, what that actually means for business. So on the one same token, I start to, and these are just very real worries. And, in my world where I'm at is, while I'm thinking about, how to develop the business beyond that, I also have this worry about like, can it go the other way? And so it's almost like, should I be, just holding on to where I'm at and, doing a good job that way? Or is it time to, go full on offense? And these are kind of just the struggles that go through my mind on a day-to-day basis. Worry about, whether to go forward or whether just to prevent yourself from going backwards. And I think a lot of people would be like, the only way not to go backwards is to make sure you're just going forward. So it's like, but it's a bit of a mental grind that way. But I do think there's a lot to say about, just that piece about, just how they're taking attention away and how that can actually, create some staleness in what I'm dealing with right now.
You said a whole bunch of things there that I hadn't really
Yeah.
thought about before. It's not that often I get just a big dump of whoa shit like that.
Yeah.
Grab onto a few pieces there and go with it. So I'll start with, my own experience. So I have you have over 100,000 Instagram followers, right? And we'll come around to your TikTok in a minute because that's the next
Yep.
thing I want to ask about.
Yeah.
TikTok. So I put anyone who's been listening knows I've been putting a lot of effort into my social media this year. And so by the time this podcast is out, it'll have gone over 8,000 followers, which isn't a lot, in the scope of where you are. But, for many of the listeners who are probably sitting there with, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 or whatever, the fact that I went from about 3,000 at the very beginning of the year, under 3, to 8 by this point, and, I'm on a pace for 10,000 by Christmas, then that's kind of a big deal, right? And I've been consistent and very, very engaged in my stuff. And what I've noticed is, as I've continued to be engaged and develop a reputation for putting up things that are engaging, then the comments and the amount of time and effort and the messages grows and grows and grows. So I know you have experienced that on another scale, another level again. So it's kind of interesting to see that you found that that's come down a little bit. So Megan Calloway recently made some comments. We were chatting about this, how she's felt like there's been a change to Instagram, and she felt like they're pushing reels because obviously they're competing with TikTok.
Yeah.
Now, me personally, I haven't noticed any drop off in shares or comments or engagement, but I think part of that too is my audience is still kind of this medium-sized audience that is highly engaged with what I'm doing. So I think that's still fine. His cat just popped up on the screen. Mine is, I don't know where he is, probably downstairs.
Good friend.
But I've also seen people, I know Brecton Harris had made a post saying that he was complaining openly about Instagram and how there were changes, and I don't know if he was getting less engagement. I mean, you go onto his wall and there's like still 10,000 comments per post or whatever, just something absurd. So, but he said he's got to focus more on YouTube and his email list and a handful of other things. I think there is a wisdom in not being married into one particular app or social media entity, right? I think it's common wisdom to, get your email list going. It's something that I floundered with for a long time. So I recently, hired a friend of mine who's brilliant with email marketing list type stuff. So she's going to set it all up for me. In fact, I'll give her a shout out, Tara Arndt. She's, you can find her on Instagram or Facebook. If you're interested in learning more about this, what I would start doing is I would just get on her email list because she sends out a lot of information about this. And I was on her email list for quite a while. I know her in person. I know her husband, Tim, who he hosts the Inland Empire Fitness Conference in Spokane every year, obviously canceled this year. So they're good friends. And so I had someone as a resource when I wanted to go and get email stuff set up. Like, and I'm not planning on selling much of anything over it. I mean, I had an affiliate thing with John Goodman, the PTDC, so I could have used it for that, but I mostly did that through social media. But even now, if anyone listening, you're just worried about clients on the floor, and this stuff that we're talking about seems like 3 steps ahead, in the future, it's still a good idea to start it now, because then that way at least you have it. And I just found it hard to set up because I'm not good with this tech type stuff. So I figured, all right, I'm going to hire an expert. So be aware that there's someone out there who's great at this stuff, someone reputable. I mean, I'm very careful who I recommend. And I mean, Tara, absolutely, really good professional person who can help you, but there's going to be a lot to learn even just from the free email stuff. So get on her email list. Now, I guess with the staleness, I don't know if I've really hit that wall yet, but some of the things you said about, being kind of capped out with clients, I still feel like people might look at me, and I'm a busy trainer. And yes, there's always new clients coming on, but I still have those little flickers where I'm like, oh, last couple of weeks I haven't trained as many people have been inactive, whatever. and you start to worry a bit. And then of course this year throws that into, more flux. But over time, you learn to trust the fact that referrals are going to come from places. If you're doing all your groundwork really, really well, and you're being someone who is putting information out there, you have a good reputation, you're taking good care of your clients, and just referrals will just happen. They will. You just can't predict when they'll happen. So it still feels like there's always work to do to stay at that level. And I think what I interpret you saying is it's been so secure and automatic because of the scope of your following that you haven't felt that little button being pushed for him. Oh shit, I can get clients. Oh shit, whatever. And then all of a sudden it just becomes a little too complacent, and therefore you keep thinking about, all right, well, what's next? This is easy. So I'm guessing that a lot of the people listening haven't felt that yet because they're still working on their businesses, trying to grow stuff. Hey, I want more online clients, or I'm trying to build up a few more in-person clients.
Yeah.
And if anybody's experiencing this, either way, I actually want you to reach out to message me if you feel kind of stale and complacent because it's almost too easy, or if you're very much still in that shit, I'm always, quote, hustling to make sure I have more clients or keep clients coming in as the same pace that people just turn over. Like I have lifetime clients that I have people who train with me for a while and then they're like, hey, thanks so much. This is wonderful. So if you've had either of those experiences, I'd love to hear from you in a message. But any additional thoughts on the staleness and the direction you want to go, or you just still haven't figured it all out yet?
Well, I think well, just for the people who like aren't at a point where this stuff comes easily, the way I got to this point was taking advantage of a platform that was quote unquote open for business. And we can talk about the TikTok stuff after that, which is kind of where more of the opportunity lies right now. But I just it's just a matter, like I think a lot of this stuff, like a lot of business is just a matter of it's a personal development journey in a lot of ways. And I think you got to go through these periods and just accept them. And I haven't really been too hard on myself as far as just like, not really knowing where to go next, or sometimes getting up and not really feeling like posting or like it's actually picked up a little bit lately. And I just had to kick myself into gear and kind of get back to the basics and get back to what I used to be doing. But it's, it's just, it's been a weird time. Like I talk, the COVID things kind of, it's created some staleness in life which I think has created some staleness in the way I run the business, or as far as like, the marketing, the content side of things and stuff like that. But also just, I've forced myself into something new, like, the TikTok thing, which who knows is even going to be a worthwhile, venture and whatever. But that's kind of the way I've kind of kicked it into, shaking things up, is just trying to look for something different.
So here's a big question I have about TikTok, because I created an account just on Jordan Syatt's urgings, but I really haven't looked at it all. I put one post.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm doing too many things. So one of the things we always battle with is trying to be on too many platforms. Another thought is, well, is this the next big thing? And clearly Jordan has thought it is, and you think it is. Now Instagram is bringing in Reels. So Instagram has been clever in fighting off Snapchat. And Snapchat's not set up well for fitness professionals to really take advantage of it as a brand creation vehicle. At least I don't think so. So with TikTok, do you think there is a really big future there? Or, I mean, there's this idea that it's, younger kids on there. And I mean, maybe like 10 years, 20 years from now, they're going to be like potential like client customer types. It feels to me like it's so easy to scroll through that how much engagement do you really get on it? And how much is it just easy to accumulate following as a vanity metric? And how much depth and substance is there really in TikTok?
So I think that's like a good question. And I think like, I mean, for one, I'm throwing myself in there, partly because like I've got I guess like getting on video, like for one, I think being on there, even if you like, I don't even plan like I've got 45,000 followers there over the last like 6 months. I have no idea. I don't even know yet if I have I don't know if I have a paid dollar from a customer through that platform. I know I have a lot of like people coming through the email list now, which I've used that for, but are they all 17? So it's like, I don't know yet. I can't tell I can't even tell the age of my followers, although, looking at the comments and stuff, you can kind of get a sense, but there's a lot of, 16, 17 year olds, but also is the algorithm kind of pushing my stuff towards older people because I'm older? Who knows? Because there's like, my mom shares like 5 TikToks to her Facebook every day. My mom is, 65. So it's like, it is aging up, and it's like I'm just kind of there just as a skill building for one. Like if it doesn't work out and I go, and people are consuming this type of content on Instagram, then all of a sudden I'm a little bit more comfortable with using these editing things and stuff like that. However, if we're at a point where it's not beyond TikTok to add pictures, and then all of a sudden my recycled infographics that are on my computer just waiting to get unloaded on a new platform, all of a sudden may be able to go viral on a place like that, and maybe a following of 50,000 people. And again, the following numbers, like I was going to go back to that, but following number is very misleading as far as like how well someone's doing, or how many leads you're going to be getting. There's a different value of follower in different places and how you actually get them, and we're very different that way. But the thing is, like 50,000 following on TikTok right now could be like 1 million, if the platform continues to grow and it continues to develop. Because right now that platform feels like Instagram was when all it was a photo editing app. Whereas now, like, it's a video app. It's you got reels, you got pictures, you got you got lives. TikTok has lives, but I'm just saying, like, this platform may be in like its crawling stages, and it may look even more like Instagram. It may be like we don't even know what it's going to look like, or it could go away entirely. And all I've got from it was a few people on my email list that weren't there before, and maybe some comfort making content on reels later on. But I'm just kind of there just playing. And it's like if I didn't have a following anywhere and I wanted to get new people, and I was like just running a relative, like if I was just starting out, I'd probably be starting with if I had a small following of my friends and family on Instagram and that type of stuff. It just reminds me of the way I started on Facebook, posting every day. I'd be trying to start my business with those people. But then I'd probably be playing with TikTok like I was playing with Instagram 4 years ago, getting nowhere for a year, and then all of a sudden just realizing, okay, these infographics things work, and then all of a sudden doing that. Whereas you could play with TikTok for a while, start building your business on Instagram with the people there, and just like play with it and develop some skills, and figure out what works, and try stuff. And all of a sudden you may be someone who, like, if things go well, it expands from there, and you develop a bit of a following.
There's a couple things that you said there I think are really important. The skill building part, being able to take the skill of figuring out any media platform, right? I mean, we certainly, I've been a little fixated on Instagram. I've been a bigger presence on Facebook for a while. I'm a little less active, but still on Facebook, obviously. I never adopted Snapchat in any sort of meaningful way, and I have yet to adopt TikTok. But I mean, there are people in our industry who actually just go onto Pinterest and crush and are very active, which honestly sounds like a pretty smart place to be.
Yeah.
I think that one audience tends to lean female a little bit. Reddit's a little different, but there are people who are highly active on Reddit. And then there are a lot of the people that are bigger names in our industry. Your Lane Norton, good example. They were active on the old message board. So these are all little different variations. I mean, anyone who got into Twitter early and has blown up a big Twitter following, or anyone who's very skilled at YouTube. And even this podcast, a podcast is a form of media. So you got to look at, okay, well, where are your skills? What did you do to develop the skills on each of these platforms? Because TikTok is not the first, and it will not be the last thing to come along, cause a stir. And so far, nothing's really knocked Facebook down. I mean, Facebook's under pressure ideologically, I suppose, in the media for some of the stuff it's doing. I mean, it looks, depending on which side of ideological spectrum people are on, but there's a bit of controversy recently about some openly like censorship, basically, right? So you're starting to see stuff like that. Twitter, same sort of thing. So who knows what's coming up next? There may be a new thing that comes along that eventually does unseat Instagram and Facebook as being these big dominant players in this space. Now, I don't really think that Facebook's going anywhere unless by some miracle the US government turns around and just breaks them up in an antitrust thing or regulates it like a utility. And quite frankly, I vote for that. I actually think that, it acts like a utility. So I almost think that they should just turn it into a utility. I don't think it's going to happen. There were talk way back when about breaking up Microsoft and they never did it. That's a whole different conversation. But point is, there will be something new, right? And then if you have the skill and the ability to get into that new platform when it comes out, like you could talk about, I've written stuff on this, like Vine. If anyone remembers Vine, TikTok is kind of like the new Vine. Vine was bought and then dismantled, right? It was taken offline. So a lot of people have built these big followings and made money and product placements on these 6-second Vines. Now, a lot of those people who blew up big Vine followings, like some of them vanished, but a lot of them turned around, took those skills and translated that into Instagram, or maybe they're now on TikTok, or maybe they're on Snapchat, or they built out from there. So that skill set and the ability to go into whatever platform, figure it out, build an audience and a following, and then leverage it into, as you mentioned, getting email addresses, which is the ultimate end goal to control the audience that you're creating, because any platform can be taken away or dismantled or become obsolete. I mean, MySpace is the old example. I don't think that Facebook will ever truly be like MySpace, but there's also a generational aging out thing. Like younger adopters are not anywhere near as prevalent on Facebook. That may not matter to our generation, but a much younger generation, that could be a thing where if your dominant platform is Facebook and you're just stuck to it, I still think there's a lot of value in staying in the demographic of the older adult who can definitely pay, they can afford services, and that's a generation that will need more and more and more fitness, especially with what's going on in the world. But long term, I don't think getting mired in sticking your head in the sand, staying in one platform and blindly just like ignoring everything else that's going on and coming around is a wise strategy.
Yeah. Well, it's pretty simple. Like, well, for one, I wouldn't recommend people just wait around for the next platform that's they're going to put a few posts out and have 1,000 followers. Even though I would also say that there's probably always going to be new opportunities that as long as the internet is there and as long as technology is advancing, we're going to have new places where people are going. Maybe just because they're fed up with the ads on Instagram and Facebook and they go to TikTok because there's less, or they go or we have technologies and places to put stuff like in terms of virtual reality, where now there's new platforms where people are, and maybe you're a trainer on a gym floor in a virtual reality setting, and now your sales and communication skills in person are now that you used to use on a real gym floor are now working in a fake gym floor, so to speak. Right? Like the skills are always the same. Like if you can speak and you can write, communicate well, or you can design pictures, or any way you can communicate with, like, it's always going to be the same. So like I hired a videographer last year. I can't tell you whether that was a profitable thing for me, and I spent a lot of money having him around. And I can't tell you at all whether I made money directly off of the videos we put out. Maybe that would have happened anyways, like building a following, that type of stuff. But when I hired him, I was like, would I pay this much money just to get comfortable on camera? Is that worthwhile? And I said to myself, I was like, well, it sounds like a fucking crazy amount of money to get comfortable this way. But I was like, if that's all that happened, would it be worth it? And I was like, yeah, probably, because most people are scared to do this. And the first day I had him over, like, he put the camera on me. Like I said, people asked me, how do you get comfortable on camera? And I was like, well, I hired someone, had them come over to my place with a camera and pointed at me. And then I would feel like a total idiot if I sent him home without getting comfortable on the camera. So he was in my kitchen and we're start filming stuff. The first day was just awfully, dreadfully bad. You cannot put that stuff out. Like I just, and it was, I think it was as bad as I thought it was, where most people are just too hard on themselves when it comes to camera work. But all of a sudden you're comfortable doing stuff. And now, when it comes to maybe being like a little bit more vocal, or my tonality is better when I speak on a place like TikTok. And if all of a sudden, that's good for me, it was probably because I planted those seeds in different places, not just because I was waiting around for an opportunity, but because these are just the skills that are going to help you anyways. And if the internet goes away, speakers, communicators, people who are willing to go up on people to a gym floor and actually like, engage them over time and build relationships and these types of things, or teach people in speaking events when we're allowed to do that stuff again, it's not going away. So you shouldn't be waiting for those reasons, because like that's how you market. Like it's never going to change. Like if we go back to blogging, like part of the reason why I think that one of the biggest reasons why I've been able to do this so comfortably is I used to skip class and write on message boards about hockey. And I did it like 40,000 posts over the course of 3 years. Like I was obsessed. And from day 1 to day 40, am I communicate and argue and not argue in a way that's like I was an asshole, but argue in a way that people actually respected and listened to, and got to a point where like I didn't really have a following on this message board, but I would say everyone thought I was right all the time because it's just the way I communicated and stuff like that. And all of a sudden, when it comes to dealing with comments on Instagram, or dealing with people like telling me I'm an idiot or something like that, or all the engagement we get on as fitness professionals, like that was planted in a way that like I was just doing what I wanted to do and communicating and that type of thing. That had never had any intention of using those skills I built hiding away on my computer in classrooms and stuff. So it's get those skills now regardless, because they're going to help you wherever.
I never thought about this, but I actually had a similar experience. I used to be very active on fantasy baseball boards. I gave up playing fantasy sports many years ago.
Yeah.
But you would know that how much time you pour into that. And the same thing, posting, interacting as a quote authority on the particular topic. And something I forgot about that that I would have been in my early 20s. I did a podcast appearance as a guest talking on on fantasy baseball in particular with an old pal of mine who's gone on to be a very prominent figure in the fantasy baseball sports world, a guy named Paul Sporer. Mm-hmm. So I hadn't thought about that in years and years. So that's a whole different lifetime ago. But you're right; those skills probably laid the groundwork for some of the stuff that came later. It's like with the podcast, Dean and I setting this thing up. It was his idea, and then we just ran with it. But he did because he asked me, because he knew I was dabbling in some YouTube stuff. Now, I've since not bothered much with YouTube. I really don't have any sort of presence on there. But at least those initial videos were the sort of thing where Dean knew what I was doing there. He was checking that stuff out. And he also knew that the network and the relationships I had in the industry. So he was like, hey, we should do this. I said, sure, let's do it. And it spiraled into, well, where it is now, and who knows where it'll go in the future. And this has allowed valuable connections with people. I mean, there are like a lot of the people like yourself. I mean, I've sat down and had dinner with you before. I've known you for a few years, but there are people that I know through the ether who I've gotten to get to know really well. Guys like Maddie Fusaro recently, Dr. Jordan Shallow, and Matthew Ibrahim are just three really good examples of recent podcasts where just that conversation, that podcast turned into an ongoing relationship. Maddie and I text each other, and Jordan is someone who just like hit it off with, because we're originally both from Newfoundland. And these are not obscure, no-name figures in our industry. I've been following Maddie's YouTube stuff for many years, just as an example.
Well, it's funny, like, and I think this breaks into like, because you were talking about how your Instagram's been growing and that type of thing, and I'm thinking there's such a contrast between both of the way we did it. And I still remember that, like, we met at the fitness summit back in like 2016, 2017 or something like that. And and just for anyone, like, and I think this kind of goes into styles as far as how you might be able to do this stuff, because your following obviously smaller than mine, but also the way you've gotten your followers has largely been through networking and put obviously being a great fitness professional, but also making friends in the industry, running the podcast, that type of stuff, which has garnered you a lot of shared from very big people, like Mike Israel, these like Jordan Syatt, these type of people who are vouching for you. So the value of each follower you get through that is just like high. Like, okay, Jordan vouches for this guy, like Mike Israel vouches for this guy. So it's just like huge. Whereas, and you being when we met at the fitness summit, like I think like I was like, you were just so easy to meet because you were out there to meet everyone. And I bet like 20 to 50 people at that event have the same experience with you that I did. Whereas when I go to events like that, I'm just
So many friends from that first event. Yeah.
oh, huge. Yeah, like you're just like, like and not handing out cards, but just like making friends everywhere. Whereas I'm a little bit more introverted. And those events, like I like going to them, I like meeting people, but the idea that I'm going to come away with that with like 30 names and 30 friends is just not the way I interact. So there's probably a lot of people out there like me who like they don't feel like I was scared of the fitness industry just due to the idea of selling on the floor, and all these things and marketing yourself and sales. I was just like, God, this is like, can I just do the job? Whereas, a lot of people think the way I market myself on Instagram, like do my Q&As, and like sometimes they're pretty animated and I'm joking around, and it's not that I have no personality, but people think I'm so extroverted because of the way I do it. And I'm like, at the end of the day, I'm just a guy alone in a room with a fucking phone in front of my face. Like there's nothing really all that extroverted about it, except for the willing to do it, which I wouldn't say is indicative of extroversion, but I'm just saying that there's two different ways to do this. And you can be a networker who loves to interact with people and be a great professional and that type of stuff, and meet a lot of people and go to events and run a podcast and do all that type of stuff, which like your following may not be as big as mine, but the way you did it was like just like the groundwork and and all that stuff. Whereas I was able to build a business doing something I love, not having to go that route, but using writing skills and like I don't want to say hiding, like not having done that, but in a lot of cases, work in coffee shops without people around me, unlike just like talking to people over the phone and stuff like that. So it's been like very different. You can do this two different ways, and the results can be very much the same, and you can build a business you love doing it either way.
And you're right, and I've thought about this before, although it didn't wasn't top of mind. A lot of the traction I've gained, last year for new followers has been because Mike Israel just keeps sharing my stuff on his wall, right? I've probably gotten, oh God, 1,500 followers just from him in the last 2 months. Jordan
Christmas
Sullivan
card.
shared one of mine in his story, and like within a day, I had 400 new followers, and a lot of those people I've been able to interact with. Like, it seems like they all stick around. And then you look around and like some big account has followed you. I saw like Matt Ogus and Pat Davidson both followed me after Mike Israel shared. I'm like, oh fuck, okay, I better follow Matt. Jesus. Or I was having fun with this. So Kelvin Escobar, he and I chat all the time. And if anyone doesn't know who Kelvin Escobar is, you're from
Okay.
the Ontario area, so you probably know. So I
Yeah.
was watching him, pitch for the Toronto Blue Jays. He went on to the Los Angeles Angels, and Kelvin's now in his mid 40s, ripped and fun and just animated. So he's got me pegged as a close friend on his Instagram. So he shares his workouts. So I get to see all of his workouts because he shares them through that. And this dude,
That's
he
awesome.
found me through T Nation writing there. And so he just started following it. So he started messaging. I'm like, what the fuck? I wake up one day, I was like, Health Vesper, what the fuck? And so I said, hey, bro, man, I grew up watching you. And so, yeah, so we chat all the time. I'm actually eventually going to bring him on the podcast just to chat with. He's hysterical. So it's astonishing the stuff that comes through all these different, connections, again, getting shared through T Nation and, knowing Mike. I went to a seminar and met Mike. I had him on Facebook, but yeah, it was actually, I think it was in 2017. And so we ended up having dinner in a small group. And so his team keeps coming back up to Alberta every year. And so I always make sure we sit down and have dinner. I've had him on the podcast a bunch of times.
Yeah.
So I know Mike really well. And you invest in those kind of relationships. And it wasn't like I went about it to make friends with all these people, because when I met you, there's a ton of people I also met, got on Facebook, connect with, who aren't well-known names in our industry. And it just so happened that there's a lot of people who really are, right? So you just treat everybody the same,
Yeah.
don't zero in on the big stars. And but at the same time, the quote big stars most of the time are actually pretty down to earth, genuine people.
They
So
don't want to be
you
graded
just,
like the big.
yeah, so if you just interact normally with them instead of being all starstruck,
Yeah.
then they tend to be super cool and relaxed around you. Sit around, and that then you have a drink with them.
Yeah.
Everybody lets loose or whatever. I remember you were pretty green around the gills at one point when I for that weekend. You had
Yeah.
a rough night, I remember. I
That's
think
good.
it's probably harder now to build an Instagram following when the infographics are blowing up, and I know that like when you and Carter Good and Jordan and Sohi and Spencer Nadolski all were just blowing infographics out there, and Jason Maxwell, you could really gain big following rapidly at that point. So I think now, we talk about Instagram a fair bit on the podcast. I think a lot of people would like to grow it and it's more challenging. But you're right, those relationships, that network has played a major role in when they share my stuff, it validates, they vouch for me. And then people are like, oh shit, who the fuck is this guy that Mike Israel keeps sharing? Wait a second, this guy was on Jonathan Goodman's feed. Tony Gentlecore just shared something of his.
Yeah.
Jordan Wyatt, who the hell is this guy? Anyway, so
Yeah.
they follow, right? And they dig into my stuff. Oh, he writes
Yeah.
for T Nation. Okay, cool, right? And all of a sudden, then they're engaged. So there's a lot of stamps of approval across the board on that. So I think it is valuable to interact with and be a genuine human being with the people in the industry who are, more influential. But at the same time, also like get into your writing, long form content creation, earn that space. Of, if you're interested in writing for a publication like T Nation or bodybuilding.com, get your shit out there, practice it to the point where you're on there. And those are major
Yeah.
seals of approval of credibility in our world.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, um, just get jacked and develop some writing skills and talk to T Nation, and all of a sudden you've got a lot of people vouching for you and stuff like that. But like it's no, I admire the way you did it. Like and I think like it goes back to we both would have heard this at some point. Lou Schuler says when the industry's ready for you, like it'll tell you. Whereas everyone wants to kind of just like, hey, like let's just do it. Whereas so like in the way that you develop that through just steady like building relationships, talking to people, and like obviously like just doing the job well, and like you're and especially like with your like where you are at T Nation, but like and all these places, like the industry is ready for you because you were good at your job, and like people want to listen to you and stuff like that. And all of a sudden, and like, why do people pop on the podcast and then start vouching for you? They're just like, this guy's good to vouch for. And it just like, and it just happens to work out that way. And the thing is, it's just going to keep working out that way as long as you keep doing it.
That's funny. I actually just got a email yesterday. And it was from somebody. It was a professional sounding email, and they're like, "Hey, we see your podcast, blah 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 blah. Great job." It's like, yeah, we have this agency, and we're wondering if you're interested in us recommending you guests. You're not under any obligation, and listed off a whole bunch of people who I've never heard of, except for Ben Greenfield, who has gotten so far off into the bullshit end of the spectrum that he's not someone I'd ever want to have on here.
Yeah.
So, but otherwise, I didn't recognize any of these names. So, and oftentimes I'll just ignore this stuff. But this one, I was like, I gotta have some fun. So I politely replied, "So, oh, thank you so much." And I probably have about a year's worth of people I want to get on here and talk to. And meanwhile, and I know they didn't look and go in depth to what I was doing at all. They're just selling some sort of bullshit idea. So yeah, and actually, thankfully, I've had Dr. John Berardi and Martin Rooney and Dr. Mike Isertel and Brett Contreras and so on and so forth, a bunch of other noteworthy names in our world in my email, and I thank them very much. So that was kind of just a little point of comedy, right?
Yeah.
There's a ton of value in building a network and getting to know people. But again, at that event, right? Like you didn't know who I was. I didn't know who you were when we first met. I knew who the speakers were, and there's a handful of people hanging out. Like John Romanello was there. I knew who he was. He wasn't one of the speakers.
Yep.
But you try to make an effort to interact with a lot of those people. But at the same time, a lot of the best relationships, lucrative relationships that I've made out of some of these events are people that weren't someone who I knew before going into that.
100%.
So I've got to get to rolling. I've got a client in an hour.
Yep.
It's a really great chance to catch up with you and chat. So I guess we've talked a lot about social media, so we do need to let people know where to find you on Instagram, TikTok, and whatnot.
Yeah. So it's well, first off, thanks for having me on, man. It's been good to catch up. You can catch me at Instagram would be Chad Hargrove 1, because there's another Chad Hargrove out there. So, and that's the same thing on TikTok, Chad Hargrove 1 on Instagram and on TikTok, and you can find me at my website's chadhargrove.com as well.
I think it's pretty straightforward to find you. It's nice when I have this sort of weird thing. A lot of people, instead of using their own name, will have some sort of very generic, and I'm sure a lot of listeners, and guys, like I'm not criticizing it, but a lot of listeners will have their Instagram profile will be a fitness brand name. Now it's like, we all know what precision nutrition is. We all know what Renaissance periodization is. And a handful of these other, Stronger You we mentioned.
Yeah.
But it's not that those names built those companies. Those companies and what they grew into made the name ubiquitous.
Yep.
So I personally am a proponent of, naming your own name is unique unless you're someone who literally has a name that is the same as someone else's. Like
Yeah.
there are two Chris Vrumans in the industry. One is a keto guy and one is a pal of mine on Facebook who's kind of a part of our world. So that's a bit unlucky.
Yeah.
Outside of that, we all know who Dean Somerset is. We all know who Jordan Syatt is. We all know who Luca Hocevar is, or at least I hope so.
Yep.
Mike Isertel. So I think that if you're somewhere where you're trying to grow and get your name out there, or if you're in a space that's not too dissimilar from where you and I are, you and I, as well as we've done, we're still not John Berardi. So
Yeah.
I think there's something to be said for using your brand name, unless you're just so determined to build this business entity that is bigger than yourself, and maybe one day you want to sell it. Like I know P2P talks about that a lot with Cressy Sports Performance, how they wish they had not named it after Eric, but there were still a lot of benefits to putting Eric's name on it early on. So either way,
Well,
I
yeah.
go ahead.
Yes, I mean, uh, like, but also like if you have like a business idea like that, like just go for instance like loseweightslow.com or something like that. The way I could go, it's almost like you may as well do that. Like, and if you have the chops to like build a business like that from scratch, like I just that sounds really hard. But like you could be like Chad Hargrove, the guy that helps people lose weight slow, and then when you develop like when you have people like, oh, that's really good, maybe that's the idea where you actually turn that into the business and take your name away from it a little bit more, versus thinking that's how it's supposed to start. I mean, like when speaking about branding, and I would have actually heard this from Jordan Syatt actually when we first started out. He's like, you're not supposed to start with a brand. You're supposed to like develop the brand based on the stuff you're saying over and like your brand kind of just develops itself. And then like, and that's kind of like where I got to was I was just putting out the stuff that I thought was important. I brought in followers who also thought that stuff was important, and you bring in a certain kind of client through that, and they're usually the people who like share your previous struggles. And now I get to a point 3 years later where I'm like, and I don't have a logo, like I don't have all the stuff that people want to start with. But now I'm like, okay, well, what have I been saying for the last 3 years? And then, that's kind of where I went back to the same my business coach said was lose weight slow. I was like, well, that's kind of almost what I'm telling like most people to do, because, most of my clients take vacations, they drink. And I'm just like, hey, like, if you think this is going to go fast and you're also going to do all the things you want to do, that's just setting yourself for massive disappointment in terms of just unrealized expectations, that the fact that you actually do go 2 months and lose 2 pounds if you actually make it that far, because most people just get disappointed they haven't lost 4 in 4 weeks and they're done. So like just don't rush the whole branding thing. Just be you, and if you have important stuff to say, then people are going to be ready for you, and eventually maybe you turn that into a bigger brand. But if you're going to start at the bigger brand, like you better know what you better know what your customer, and you better know what the market is, and you better already know that stuff, because the people that are starting these businesses, in a lot of cases, they might just be starting it because they have a lot of money and know a few people, or they've been in the industry a long time and they understand the consumer and how to brand a business and stuff like that, which is probably something you're gonna have to lay groundwork and have some experience in order to do.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. I think that is a wise piece of advice is, don't start with a brand so much as just develop yourself. I think you will find a brand within your interests, the type of clientele that seem to come to you, and the things that emerge from your messages and your interaction with people.
Mhm.
So we know where to find you. Guys, everyone listening, I really appreciate the fact that you keep tuning in every week. I've been getting a ton of really cool feedback. I really would love to hear, messages from you guys. If you've never messaged before, but you are a regular listener, please give me a shout on Instagram. That's where I'm the most interactive. And then if you're someone who's finding this for the first time, and through Chad and his media, then I appreciate the fact that you listen to this one. Um, I've mentioned some of the recent guests. If you take a look through our recent library, people who, Sohee Lee is a good friend, Jordan Syatt, a good friend, who do not dissimilar things from what Chad has been doing, and they're
Mhm.
both fairly recent guests, so you can totally check out what those sound like. And if you like it, I'd love it if you stick around and subscribe, because I've got a lot more really cool stuff coming up. And another guest that I have booked is Susan Niebergall, who is,
Nice.
not in a dissimilar space either from the type of message that you have as well. Susan's really
Good,
wonderful,
good friend.
60 and shredded and just awesome. She's really cool. So she's
Yeah.
coming up. I got some more cool stuff planned. Meanwhile, thanks so much. And if you're not following me on social media, Andrew Coates Fitness on Instagram, please jump on that. I definitely want to interact with you. Say hi. And Chad, thanks so much. And I hope that travel restores and we'll be able to sit down and have a drink
Yeah.
at an in-person event in the not too distant future. Mentally, I've kind of resigned myself to knowing that probably won't see much for the first half of 2021. But my plans are to go ahead with the Evolve Symposium in probably September here in Edmonton. And hopefully we can put out a big party and that'll be a great event. Well, thanks, brother. I really appreciate you
Yeah.
coming on.
Catch a baseball.